always thought I was the pillar of my family until I overheard a conversation in the mall that revealed a shocking secret. My wife and best friend conspired against me, even planning to oust me from the company I built with my own hands on our children's 18th birthday. I adjusted my tie as I walked through the upscale mall, the afternoon sun streaming through the skylights. My Brooks Brothers suit felt a little too warm under the glaring light, and I reached up to loosen my collar. I had just come from a productive lunch meeting at Riverside, the Astro, sealing the next phase of a major project for Meditech, a billion-dollar enterprise I built from the ground up. Success like that doesn't come easily, but it had always been worth the sacrifice I made. At least I thought so. I was heading to the parking garage, mentally running through my schedule for the rest of the day, when I heard it. A voice so familiar, it stopped me in my tracks. Ellie's voice. My eldest daughter. God, did you see what Dad was wearing to that board meeting yesterday? That I was. So last season. There was a tone in her voice that I couldn't quite place. Dismissive. Cruel. Eden. I instinctively stepped behind a wide marble pillar and peeked around. Ellie sat at a cafe table with her siblings, Noah and Lily, my 17-year-old triplets. Shopping bags from high-end stores surrounded them, their carefree laughter drifting through the air. At first, I smiled. Seeing them together always gave me a sense of pride. My children, my legacy. But then Ellie's words sank in and the tone wasn't pride anymore. It was dissonance. Mom says he has no sense of style, Ellie added, swirling her iced latte with a manicured finger. Noah snorted, barely looking up from his phone. At least, he's good for the credit cards. Speaking of which, I need him to sign off on the Porsche before the transfer. I blinked, trying to process what I was hearing. The Porsche. The transfer. As if that matters, Ellie said, rolling her eyes. Mom says, once he signs the company over on our 18th birthday, we won't need his permission for anything anymore. My grip on my briefcase tightened, my knuckles turning white. What were they talking about? My mind raced, but I stayed frozen behind the pillar, listening as my own children unraveled a narrative I hadn't been privy to. Uncle Ray says he's already got the adoption papers ready, Ellie continued in a lower voice, but not low enough to escape my ear. His mom's boss is going to be our real dad. Finally. Legally. And everything. The words hit me like a freight train. Uncle R.Y. Adoption papers. Ray Jack, what's up? CEO of Bio Advance, my biggest competitor. R.Y. had been a family friend or so. I thought for years. He was close to Emily, my wife, and had always been kind to the kids too. Kind. He often checked in on them when I was away for business. Something I thought was just him being supportive. He wasn't supportive. He was invasive. My breath caught in my throat as Noah spoke, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Did you see his face when we asked for those new cars? He actually thinks we're going to keep him around after the transfer. Like, what does he think? This is a family sitcom. Ellie smirked. Mom says he'll probably end up in some retirement home in Florida. At least this way he gets to pretend it's his choice to step down. I wanted to step out from behind the pillar. I wanted to demand an explanation, to look my children in the eye and ask them what the hell they thought they were saying. But I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to the polished floor and my heart pounded so loudly I was sure they'd hear it. Lily, the youngest of the triplets, fidgeted with her coffee cup. She wasn't laughing like the others. Maybe we shouldn't. She started, her voice small and hesitant. Oh, grow up. Lily. Ellie snapped. Mom and R.Y. already have everything planned. The lawyers are just waiting for our birthday. Besides, her voice turned dicey. He's not even our real father. Mom told me. Ray's been there since the beginning. Dad was just too stupid and focused on his precious company to notice the ground felt like it shifted beneath me. I stumbled back, catching myself on the cold marble of the pillar. Not their real father. Noah leaned back in his chair, stretching. Remember that time he tried to ground me for taking his car? Mom and R.Y. thought it was hilarious. They took me to that Lakers game anyway. Right under his nose. Ellie laughed. the sound sharp and devoid of warmth. Ray says, "Dad's getting sloppy at work." The board's already worried about his decisions. Once the transfer happens, it'll be easy to push him out completely. Oh, I said, "We're doing him a favor." Lily tried to speak again, her voice trembling. "The what about?" Ellie cut her off with a glare, lowering her voice. "Don't even think about warning him. As Mom says, you've been acting weird lately. Remember what side your bread is buttered on. Ray's going to be our father. That's just how it is. Don't mess this up for us." The three of them gathered their shopping bags and left the table, their laughter fading as they walked toward the mall exit. I stayed behind the pillar, my body trembling. My own children, my wife, my supposed best friend, they were conspiring against me, and I had been too blind to see it. The truth hit me all at once, like an avalanche. I couldn't stop. I had missed every sign, every business trip where Y had coincidentally been in town, every time Emily had insisted on handling the kids' medical record, or school forms herself. Every moment when Ray's company seemed to be one step ahead of mine in the market. I felt sick. My phone buzzed in my pocket, shaking me from my spiraling thoughts. It was Emily, probably wondering why I wasn't home yet for dinner. Family dinner. What a joke. I took a deep breath, straightened my tie, and walked toward the parking garage. My face was calm, but inside I was a storm. Use of Betrayal replayed in my mind as I reached my car, sliding into the driver's seat. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. "Mike," I said, when the line connected. "It's Alex. Remember that favor you owe me? I need access to some security footage in Mike. Keep this between us." As I drove home, my mind churned with plans. I didn't know exactly what I would do yet, but one thing was certain. This wasn't going to end the way Emily and her wife thought it would, not by a long shot. The faint glow of computer monitors illuminated the darkened security office, as my charismatic head of security leaned forward in his chair. His fingers danced across the keyboard, opening file after file. The hum of servers provided a constant backdrop as I stood behind him. My tie loosened, my focus razor sharp. "Here we go," Mike muttered, pulling up a time-stamped video. February 15th of last year. "Ray's car in your driveway had to pee. You were in Singapore for the medical conference." He didn't leave until he squinted at the screen. 11:47 p. I stared at the grainy footage, watching the black luxury sit and pull into my driveway. My wife, Emily, emerged a few moments later, wearing the silk dress I bought her for our anniversary. Her wife stepped out of the car, a bottle of wine in one hand, her bag of takeout in the other. They disappeared inside, and the video ticked on, hour by hour, until he finally exited the house, looking far comfortable. "Show me the front door camera from that day," I said. My voice died. Mike pulled up the footage. There it was again. Emily, greeting Ray with a smile too wide to be casual, her hand brushing his arm as she led him inside. There was no hesitation, just an ease that told me this had been going on for a long time. "Anything else?" I asked. "This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside." My voice barely carried. My chest felt tight, like a vice was closing around it. Mike hesitated, then opened another folder. "This one's worse," he warned and clicked play. It was footage from Ray's office set bio advance. Emily sat across from him, handing over what was unmistakably a mediatic folder. The cover was stamped confidential, and I recognized it immediately as part of our arterial stent project. The timestamp on the video matched exactly with the date. Bio advance filed. A suspiciously similar pattern. 3 days before we were ready to go public with ours. He swallowed hard. My hands, gripping the back of Mike's chair so tightly. My knuckles turned white. "She's been feeding him information," I said, the words tasting bitter for years. Mike nodded, grimly. "It gets worse. Remember when your board was blindsided with that shareholder vote last year? Look at this." He opened another file. Emails between Emily and RY. They discussed strategies, timelines, and how best to position the triplets as the inheritors of Meditech. After they turned 18, Emily detailed how she was preparing the kids to see Ray as their real father, pushing the narrative that I was a weak absentee figure too consumed by work to care about them. "They're setting you up for a takeover," Mike said. "As soon as your shares transfer to the kids on their birthday, Ray and Emily will have them push you out of the company entirely. They're already drafting the paperwork." My mind raced, piecing together the puzzle. Every sleepless night, every long business trip, every moment I'd spent building Meditech, they twisted it into a weapon against me and my children. My own flesh and blood were pawns in their game. "I need more," I said, my voice cold. "Everything on Emily, Ray and the kids, every meeting, every phone call. And I need the medical records." Mike hesitated. "The medical records? What are you thinking?" "I need to know if they've lied about anything else," I said, my gut churned with suspicion. The words from Ellie echoed in my mind. "He's not even our real father." Mike nodded, his fingers flying across the keyboard moments later. The results appeared on the screen. Blood types, genetic markers, paternity tests. It was all there, and the truth was undeniable. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside, Mike said quietly. "The DNA matches, no question about it." The relief I felt was short-lived, swallowed quickly by anger. Emily had manipulated them into believing I wasn't their father. She had poisoned their minds against me to serve her agenda. My children weren't just being stolen. They were being destroyed from the inside out. "What do you want to do with this?" Mike asked. I straightened, my mind clearing as the first threads of a plan began to form. "We're not going to confront them. Not yet. Criminal charges would hurt the company and the kids. I won't destroy everything I've built just to take them down." Mike frowned. "Then, but I was on the first. What's the play?" "We make them think they've won," I said, my voice hardening. "We let them move forward with their plan, but we'll control the timeline. We'll control everything for the next few hours." We pored over files, crafting the outline of a counter-strike. Every detail of Emily and Ray's betrayal. Every stolen document. Every manipulated conversation. It all became ammunition. By the time the first rays of dawn broke through the blinds, I had a clear path forward. But there was one piece still gnawing at me. My children. They were the unintended casualties of Emily's lies. I needed to find a way to protect them, even if it meant shielding them from the full truth. "Mike," I said, as I prepared to leave, "keep an eye on the kids, especially Lily. She's not as sold on their plan as the others." I saw her hesitate. "Yesterday, we might have an hour." "Understood," Mike said. "And our why?" "Let him think he's won," I said, a faint smile tugging at my lips. "It's always darkest before the dawn. We'll make sure his dawn never comes later that evening." I sat in my study, staring at the family portrait hanging on the wall. It had been taken 2 years ago, before everything started falling apart. Ellie, Noah, and Lily. I stood smiling beside me and Emily. At the time, I thought we were happy. Oh, I hadn't seen the cracks forming beneath the surface. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a message from Emily, reminding me of the family dinner plan for the following weekend. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the reply button. For a brief moment, I considered canceling. But then I realized something. This dinner would be the perfect stage, a chance to play the part they expected me to play. "See you, Sunday," I replied, my face betraying nothing of the storm brewing within. As I set the phone down, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Clarity. Emily and her wife thought they had won. They thought I was blind, weak and stumbling toward my downfall. But they had no idea what was coming. They had underestimated me. That was their first mistake. It would also be their last. Sunday evening arrived and I found myself sitting at the head of the long dining room table, surrounded by my family. Emily had gone all out, ensuring everything looked picture perfect. The table was set with our best china candles flickered in the center and the smell of rosemary. Lamb filled the air. The triplets were laughing together, their voices mingling with the soft hum of classical music. In the background, it was a scene straight out of a magazine. But I knew better. Now this wasn't a family dinner. It was theater. Dad, Ellie said, her tone light, but carrying a subtle edge. Did you remember to look over the paperwork for the company restructuring? I felt a confused frown, pausing as I reached for my glass of wine. Paperwork? What paperwork? Luke sighed, shaking his head in feigned exasperation. The documents Mom left on your desk last week. We need to make sure everything's in place before our birthday, Uncle. Ray said. Timing is critical. There was the slip. They thought they were being subtle, but I could see the eagerness in Noah's eyes. He was proud of his involvement in their scheme, proud of the part I had assigned him in this grand plan to overthrow me. Ah yes, those papers, I said, forcing a chuckle. I'll get to them. You know how it is. Always something coming up at the office. Emily reached over to pour me another glass. Her smile, perfectly practiced. Darling, you really should let the kids help more. It's important for them to start understanding the business. After all, you'll be there soon enough. I gave her a slow nod, letting my gaze linger. Just a moment too long. She shifted slightly in her chair, her composure faltering for the briefest of seconds. Well, I said, raising my glass of family to the future. The triplets raised their glasses, chiming in with enthusiasm. Emily followed suit, her smile never wavering. But as I sipped, I let my eyes drift toward Lily. She hadn't touched her drink. Her eyes were fixed on her plate, her brow furrowed in thought. Later that night, after everyone had left the table, I found Lily alone in the garden. She was sitting on the stone bench near the fountain, staring into the rippling water. The soft glow of the garden lights cast her in a warm halo, but her expression was anything but serene. Lily, I called softly, approaching her. You're out here. All by yourself. She looked up, startled, then quickly composed herself. Just needed some air. I sat beside her, giving her space for a moment. Neither of us spoke. The night was quiet, save for the gentle trickle of the fountain. You seemed quiet at dinner, I said. Finally, is everything okay? She hesitated, her hands twisting together in her lap. I've just been thinking about a lot of things. I waited, sensing she had more to say. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in weeks. Dad, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you trust Mom? The question was a dagger sharp and unexpected. I leaned back, slightly, studying her face. Why do you ask? She hesitated again, glancing around, as if afraid someone might overhear. It's just sometimes I feel like she's keeping things from you. I took a deep breath, keeping my expression neutral. So trust is a complicated thing. It's not always about what people do. It's about what they don't. Do you trust your mother? She looked away, her silence speaking volumes. The next day, back at the office, Mike and I reviewed the latest surveillance footage. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but there were still gaps to fill. Here's something new, Mike said, pulling up a recording. This was taken at Bio Advances corporate treat last month. The video showed RY and Noah walking together on a manicured lawn. RY was gesturing animatedly, his hand on Noah's shoulder, while Noah nodded with the eager intensity of someone desperate for approval. Look at this, Mike said, zooming in, Ray handing him something. I leaned closer. It was a folder thick with documents. Noah opened it, skimming through the pages with a smile that made my stomach churn. What do you think it is? Mike asked. My guess, I said, my voice cold. Ray's already giving Noah access to MedX secrets. June's grooming him to take over. Mike frowned. That's risky. What if Noah screws up? He won't. RY knows exactly how to manipulate him, just like he's manipulated Emily and Ellie. I paused, my mind racing. But it also means Noah is more involved than we thought. We might be able to use that. Mike nodded. What's the next move? We accelerate the timeline, I said. The plan solidifying in my mind. Church Industries is ready to move on the research division. But I want the manufacturing sale lined up immediately if we can get rid of Mike before the triplets' birthday. It'll force his hand on Emily. Mike cast. What about her? She'll fold once Ray's empire collapses. She's tied her entire future to him. I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. And when it all comes crashing down, the kids will see the truth. They'll have no choice. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of carefully orchestrated moves. Jody Park, my trusted legal advisor, worked tirelessly to finalize the contracts with Church Industries. Frankie Hampton continued to unravel bio advances, fraudulent financial practices, feeding crucial intel to the SEC. And if every piece of evidence, every strategic leak was timed perfectly. Meanwhile, I played my role to perfection. At board meetings, I stumbled over presentations, feigned forgetfulness, and let whispers of my decline circulate. Arwai and Emily believed they were winning that. I was crumbling under the weight of their betrayal. But behind the scenes, the trap was tightening. One evening, as I reviewed the final documents for the manufacturing sale, a notification buzzed on my phone. It was a message from an unknown number. When I opened it, my heart stopped. It was a photo of Arwai and Emily sitting close together in a dimly lit restaurant. Ray's hand was on hers and their expressions were unmistakable. This wasn't a business meeting. It was intimate. Beneath the photo was a short caption. They think they've won. I stared at the screen, a mix of emotions rowing within me. Anger, betrayal, determination. I didn't know who had sent the message, but it didn't matter. It only confirmed what I already knew. Ray and Emily's time was running out. The morning of the triplets' 18th birthday arrived with deceptive tranquility. The sun streamed through the tall windows of my office, illuminating the carefully prepared documents on my desk. Everything was in place today. The final moves would be made. The trap fully sprung. Mike entered with his usual efficiency, a thick folder in his hands. It's done, he said, placing it on my desk. The second FDA had everything they need. Ray Empire's on borrowed time. Good, I replied, my voice steady. And the sale to Church Industries. They're ready to announce as soon as the ink dries, Mike said, his expression tight with anticipation. We've set it for later this afternoon. The manufacturing sale is timed to go public immediately after. I nodded, my mind already running through the next steps. What about the triplets? They'll be at the estate for the birthday dinner, Mike said, and Ray invited himself. HK be there with Emily. Perfect. The estate was bustling with activity by the time I arrived. Caterers moved efficiently through the kitchen and the triplets were gathered in the living room dressed to perfection. Ellie was already holding court, her laughter carrying through the room. Noah leaned casually against the fireplace, his confidence palpable only. Lily looked reserved, her eyes flicking to me with something I couldn't quite place: concern, doubt, perhaps both. Dad, Noah called, crossing the room to greet me. You're finally here. We thought you'd be tied up with work. I smiled, keeping my tone light. Not today, son. Today is about family. Ellie joined us, her designer dress flowing as she moved. Did you bring the paperwork? Uncle Ray said. We'd handle everything tonight. I raised an eyebrow, playing my part. Paperwork. The company transfer, Ellie said impatiently. You didn't forget, did you? Emily appeared just then. Or why until? She was radiant, her smile as polished as her diamond necklace. Ray, ever the charmer, clapped Noah on the back before turning to me. Alex, he said smoothly, I hope you don't mind me joining the celebration. After all, it's a big day for the kids and for Metatech. Of course, I said, forcing a smile. It's always good to see you. Her wise grin widened, snug and self-assured. He thought he was untouchable. That made it all the more satisfying. Dinner was a carefully orchestrated affair with Emily, ensuring every detail was perfect. The triplets beamed as they opened their gifts, each one more extravagant than the last. I made a toast. his words dripping with thinly veiled triumph to the future. He said, raising his glass, and to the incredible legacy these young people are about to inherit. As the dinner wound down, Noah leaned toward me. Dad, let's get the paperwork done. We've waited long enough. I nodded, rising from my seat. Of course. Let's handle it. In the study, everyone followed Dre and Emily, exchanging triumphant glances. They thought this was the moment they'd been waiting for, the culmination of their years-long betrayal. In the study, I sat behind my desk, the documents spread out before me. The triplets stood together, RY at their side, Emily watching, with barely concealed anticipation. These are the transfer papers, I said, gesturing to the stack. Once signed, Meditech shares will be held in a trust under your names. Noel reached eagerly for the pen, but I held up a hand before we proceed. There's something I need you all to see. I pressed a button on my desk, and the large screen on the wall came to life. A video began to play, footage of RY and Emily in intimate meetings, their whispered conversations, their careful planning. The triplets' expressions shifted from confusion to shock as the extent of their manipulation unfolded before their eyes. What is this? Ellie demanded, her voice shaking. It's the truth, I said, my voice calm, but firm. The truth about Ray, about your mother, and about the lies they've built around you. Noah turned to RY, his face pale. Is this real? RY stepped forward, his charm faltering. This is just a smear campaign. Alex is desperate, trying to. Enough, I said, sharply, cutting him off. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. The figure was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. The next video played footage of Ray's secret properties, his hidden affairs, his fraudulent dealings. The room was silent except for the sound of the recording. Lily was the first to speak. You knew about this? She asked, her voice trembling as she turned to Emily. Emily opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Her silence was answer enough. You lied to us, Ellie said, her voice rising, about everything, about Dad, about Ray, about who we are. Noah turned to RY, anger flashing in his eyes. You said you cared about us, about the company. Was that a lie too? Ray raised his hands defensively. Noah, you don't understand. Don't, Emmett. Noah snapped. Don't lie to me anymore. The fallout was immediate. Emily tried to defend herself, but the weight of the evidence was too much. Ellie stormed out, tears streaming down her face. Noah followed his expression, a mix of anger and betrayal. Only Lily remained standing quietly as the dust settled. RY turned to me, his mask of confidence completely shattered. You think this will ruin me? You think you've won? I stood facing him with a calm that bellied the storm inside. This isn't about winning, Ray. It's about truth, about consequences. He glared at me, then turned and left without another word. Emily followed, her composure crumbling as she disappeared into the night. Lily approached me, her eyes filled with uncertainty. Dad, she said softly, I didn't know about any of this. I don't, I said, placing a hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry. You had to find out this way. But you needed to know the truth. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. What happens now? I said, my voice steady. We rebuild together. The following morning the headlines were everywhere. Bio-advanced CO under federal investigation. Corporate espionage scandal. Rocks medical tech industry. Ray Agu's empire collapses. As the world reeled from the revelations, I focused on what truly mattered. Protecting my children, rebuilding their trust, and ensuring that the legacy of Meditech remained intact. Revenge had been sweet, but justice was sweeter. And now, with the truth finally revealed, it was time to start anew. The morning after the implosion was surreal. The house was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the night before. I sipped my coffee on the patio, the sun rising over the sprawling estate. The headlines were relentless, each one dissecting the downfall of Ray Jack and the role Emily played in his schemes. I'd expected the storm, but seeing it unfold was both satisfying and sobering. My phone buzzed on the table. A call from JOD. "They're pulling him in for questioning today," she said, skipping the pleasantries. "The second EFD are moving fast between the manufacturing defects and the financial fraud. It's going to be a landslide." "Good," I said simply. "And the triplets?" Jodie's voice softened. "Lily reached out to me. She wants to meet Tally and Noah. They'll need time." I nodded, even though she cowed, teasing me. "Thank you, JOD, for everything. You're not out of the woods yet," she warned. "Ray will fight back any way he can. And Emily, she's lost her leverage." I interrupted. "It's over for her too." JOD sighed. "I hope you're right by midday." The triplets were scattered. Ellie hadn't come back after storming out the previous night. Noah was HOL up in his room, refusing to answer my knocks. Only so I had the courage to sit with me at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea. "No one even talk to me," she said, quietly. "HEK so angry." "HEK angry at the wrong person," I replied, trying to keep my voice. He's been manipulated for so long. It'll take time for him to see the truth." "And Ellie?" she asked, looking up at me with wide, uncertain eyes. "She's strong," I said, "but this will take a toll. She's built so much of her identity around Emily's version of events." Sophia nodded, her gaze dropping to her mug. "I feel so stupid for believing them." "Don't," I said firmly. "This isn't your fault. They fed you lies. They controlled the narrative. But you saw through it. Lily, that takes strength." Her eyes glistened, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of the girl I'd raised, the one who cared deeply, who thought critically, who wanted to do the right thing. The headlines didn't stop, and by the end of the week, the entire world knew the depths of Ray's betrayal. The set froze his accounts. The FDA issued sweeping recalls of defective products, and bio-advanced stock plummeted into oblivion. Our wise wife, the one Emily had foolishly dismissed as an obstacle, filed for divorce, and the media had a field day uncovering his hidden affairs. Emily's world crumbled just as quickly. The divorce papers I had filed were public knowledge now, and her involvement in Ray's schemes left her with few defenders. Her society friends distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with scandal. When I learned that she'd moved into a modest apartment, I felt a flicker of pity. Pity. A brief fleeting sensation, buried under the weight of everything she'd done. Noah stayed distant, his anger simmering beneath the surface. Ellie was harder to read. She returned home after a few days, but avoided me. Her smiles brittle and forced. Only Lily remained a constant presence, her determination to rebuild what had been broken, giving me hope. One afternoon a week after the fallout, Noah came into my office. He stood in the door, away, his shoulders stiff, his expression a mixture of defiance and vulnerability. "I looked up some of the stuff you showed us," he said, his voice low. "The records, the patents. This happened when I was in the first or second year at junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside." "It's all real." "Yes," I said, simply giving him space to process. He stepped inside, hesitating before taking a seat across from me. "Why didn't you fight harder? Why did you let it get this far?" I leaned forward, meeting his gaze. "Because fighting too soon would have made me look like a villain. Ray and your mother would have spun it as desperation. I needed the truth to speak for itself." Noah frowned, his hands clasping tightly. "I still don't understand why they did it." "Why, Mom?" His voice broke and he looked away. "Your mother made her choices," I said, gently, "and I preyed on her weaknesses. But that doesn't excuse what they did." He nodded. "Was it my first? This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside." His jaw remained tight. "I don't know if I can forgive her." "That's your choice," I said, "but don't let their actions define. You're better than that." Noah stared at me for a long moment, then stood abruptly. I need time. You'll have it, I assured him. He left without another word. But it was a start. Ellie was the next to come around. She found me in the garden. One evening, sitting on the stone bench, beneath the old oak tree. Her heels clicked against the path as she approached, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. I hated you, she said, bluntly, stopping a few feet away. For years, I thought you were the bad guy. I know, I replied. She bit her lip, her composure cracking. Mom made it so easy to believe. She made Ray sound like the perfect father. And you. Her voice wavered and she looked away. I was so wrong. I stood slowly, closing the distance between us. You were wrong. Ellie, you were misled. There's a difference. Her shoulders shook as she fought back. Tears. How do I fix this? How do I make it right? You don't have to fix it alone, I said. We'll figure it out together for the first time in years. Ellie, let me pull her into a hug. And I held her as she cried. The weight of years of lies, finally lifting by the end of the month. The dust had begun to settle. Our wife's trial was imminent, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. Emily's involvement left her with little room to maneuver, and her attempts to salvage her reputation fell flat. But for me, the real victory was seeing my children begin to heal. Lily's acceptance into a prestigious biomedical engineering program gave her a newfound sense of purpose. Noah expressed interest in ethics compliance, determined to understand how corruption like Ray's could be prevented. And Ellie, the socialite, surprised me by enrolling in a psychology program inspired by her own journey to untangle the web of manipulation she'd endured. As I sat on the patio one evening, watching the sunset, Lily joined me, a small smile playing on her lips. You know, she said, settling into the chair beside me, I think we're going to be okay. I looked at her, seeing not just my daughter, but the strength and resilience she'd found within herself. Yes, I said, my voice filled with quiet conviction. We'll be. The weeks stretched into months, and the fallout from Ray and Emily's betrayal began to feel like a distant storm. My children were finding their footing again, but the wounds ran deep, and rebuilding trust was a slow, delicate process. Noah remained the hardest to reach while he acknowledged the truth of Ray's actions. His pride and guilt kept him at arm's length. He avoided family dinners, claiming he was too busy preparing for his internship at an ethics compliance firm. I let him keep his distance, knowing that forcing him to engage would only backfire. Ellie, on the other hand, had become a frequent presence in my life. She visited my office regularly, sometimes with questions about psychology programs, other times just to sit and talk. Each conversation felt like another step toward the relationship we lost one evening. As we walked through the garden, she surprised me with a question. Do you think people can really change? She asked, her tone serious. I stopped walking and turned to face her. What do you mean? Mom, she said, quietly. Ray. People like them. Do they ever really feel sorry for what they've done? Or is it just a game to them? The question weighed heavily between us. I thought of Emily's empty apologies, her attempts to manipulate, even as her world crumbled around her. I thought of Ray's unrepentant arrogance, the way he'd used my family as pawn in his schemes. I think some people can change, I said carefully. But it takes a willingness to face the truth about themselves, to admit what they've done and work to make amends. Not everyone has that kind of courage. Ellie nodded, her expression contemplative. I don't think Mom does. I didn't respond immediately, sensing that she wasn't looking for reassurance. Instead, I let her process her thoughts in silence as we continued our walk. Lily, the peacemaker, tried to bridge the gap between her siblings and me. She often brought Noah updates about the family, hoping to draw him back into the fold. Her persistence paid off. One Sunday afternoon, when Noah finally agreed to join us for lunch, the tension was palpable as we sat around the table. Noah was polite, but distant. His answers clipped, and his gaze rarely meeting mine. Ellie tried to engage him in conversation, but he deflected her attempts with the same guarded demeanor. It wasn't until Lily brought up her upcoming internship at a vaccine development lab that Noah's interest peaked. "That's impressive," he said, his tone softening slightly. "What kind of work will you be doing?" Lily's eyes lit up as she explained the project. Her enthusiasm infectious. For the first time in months, Noah seemed genuinely engaged at asking thoughtful questions and offering insights from his own studies. Watching them talk, I felt a flicker of hope. The walls Noah had built around himself were beginning to crack, and Lily's determination to keep our family connected was making a difference. Emily's attempts to contact the triplets grew increasingly desperate. She sent letters and left voicemails, each one a mixture of apologies and excuses. Ellie deleted the messages without listening to them. Lily read the letters, but never responded. Noah, however, kept a stack of unopened envelopes on his desk. Their presence, a constant reminder of the mother he couldn't forgive. One evening, I found him in his room staring at the pile of letters. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. He shook his head. "There's nothing to talk about. She made her choices." "She did. I agree. But holding on to anger can weigh you down. You don't have to forgive her, but you should find a way to let go of the resentment." Noah scoffed. "Easier said than done." "It is, I admit it. But you don't have to do it alone." He didn't respond, but he didn't dismiss me either. It was a small step, but one I chose to hold on to. As the months passed, I threw myself into my work at More Ethical Medical Innovations. The company was thriving, and our focus on affordable, accessible healthcare solutions was garnering international recognition. Lily often visited the lab, her keen mind and innovative ideas earning the respect of my team. Watching her grow into a confident, driven young woman was one of the greatest joys of my life. Ellie found her own way to channel her experiences, pursuing a degree in psychology, with a focus on family dynamics and trauma. She often shared her insights with me, and our conversations became a source of mutual learning and healing. Noah remained a work in progress. While he excelled in his internship, his personal growth was slower. He still kept his emotions guarded, but every now and then, I caught glimpses of the young man. I knew he could become a man driven by integrity and a desire to make the world a better place. One evening, Ellie invited me to attend a psychology seminar. She was presenting at her university. The topic was the long-term impact of parental betrayal on young adults. Her presentation was deeply personal, drawing from her own experiences and the lessons she'd learned over the past year. As I sat in the audience, listening to her speak with poise and confidence, I felt a swell of pride. Ellie had taken the pain of betrayal and turned it into something meaningful, something that could help others navigate similar challenges. After the seminar, she found me in the crowd and gave me a tight hug. "Thank you," she said softly, for what I asked. "Genuinely surprised for believing in us," she said, "even when we didn't deserve it." Her words stayed with me long after the seminar ended, a reminder that the bonds we were rebuilding were stronger than the ones we'd lost. By the end of the year, the triplets had begun to find their own paths. Lily thrived in her internship, her passion for ethical innovation driving her forward. Ellie's studies opened new doors for her, and she often spoke about wanting to work with children and families affected by trauma. Noah, while still guarded, had started to express enjoying the family business, hoping to contribute to our mission of ethical healthcare solutions. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but we were moving forward together. The betrayal that had once threatened to destroy us had instead become the foundation for something stronger. A family rebuilt on truth, resilience, and love. And in the quiet moments when the house was still, and the world seemed to hold its breath, I allowed myself to hope that the best was yet to come. Months passed, and the fragile threads connecting my children and me began to weave into something resembling a family. Again, each of them was finding their own way, carving out lives shaped not by the betrayals of the past, but by the futures they wanted to create. But there was still distance, particularly with Noah. While he had begun to warm up during family meals and occasional outings, the bond we once shared felt tenuous. I knew it would take more than time to repair the damage. One afternoon, I received an email from Mike. The subject line was simple: update on Noah and Ray. My heart sank before I even opened it. Mike's email detailed the remnants of Ray's influence. Despite everything, Noah had remained in occasional contact with RY, meeting him sporadically during his business internship. RY ever. Emmanuel Tor had presented himself as a victim of circumstance, someone who had been misunderstood and sabotaged. Noah, already grappling with guilt and confusion, seemed to be a prime target for Ray's calculated charm. I knew confronting Noah directly would only push him away, but I couldn't ignore what was happening. I called Mike, seeking his advice. Let me dig deeper, Mike suggested. If Ray's up to something, we'll find it. In the meantime, keep the lines of communication open with Noah. He needs to feel like he can't rust you. The opportunity to bridge the gap with Noah came unexpectedly. One evening he showed up at my office, unannounced. His expression conflicted. Do you have a minute? He asked. Always, I said, setting aside the report I was reviewing. He hesitated, pacing the room before finally sitting across from me. I've been talking to RY. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I know. Noah's eyes widened. How might keep tabs on anything that might affect the family or the business? I said carefully. I'm not angry. Noah, I understand why you'd want to hear his side of the story. Noah leaned back, crossing his arms defensively. He says you set him up. That the FDA raid was orchestrated to destroy him, not because he did anything wrong. And what do you believe? I asked gently. I don't know. He admitted. I've read the reports, seen the evidence. But he's convincing. He says you've always resented him, that you couldn't handle someone else being part of our lives. The words stung, but I refused to let it show. Noah, do you trust me? He hesitated, his internal conflict written all over his face. I wanted them. Let me show you something. I pulled out a file I had prepared weeks ago, anticipating this very conversation. Inside were documents detailing Ray's fraudulent schemes. Emails, financial records, and correspondence that painted a clear picture of his deceit. Noah studied the papers in silence, his expression shifting from doubt to disbelief, to anger. He lied about everything, he said. Finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, I said. And he's still lying, trying to manipulate you, because he knows you're smart, driven, and capable. He sees you as a tool. Noah, not his family. Noah sat back, rubbing his temples. Why didn't you tell me all this sooner? Because I needed you to come to me when you were ready, I said. I didn't want to force you to see the truth. I wanted you to find it for yourself for the first time in a long time. Noah looked at me without the walls he'd carefully built around himself. I'm sorry, he said quietly. You have nothing to apologize for, I said. You were caught in the middle of a very calculated plan to divide us. But now that you see the truth, we can move forward together. Noah nodded, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. Thanks, Dardier. Hold on. Noah may have weakened, but the specter of his influence still loomed. I needed to ensure he couldn't worm his way back into any of our lives. Mike's investigation turned up additional evidence of Ray's attempts to sway Noah, including subtle threats disguised as advice. I decided it was time to confront RY directly using Mike's connections. I arranged a meeting at the prison where RY was serving his sentence. When I arrived, he greeted me with the same smirk he'd worn during every phase of his schemes. Alex, he said, leaning back in his chair, as if we were old friends too. What do I owe the pleasure? This isn't a social call. Ray, I said, my tone cold. Stay away from my family. He laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the sterile visiting room. They're not just your family, Alex. They're mine too. Noah especially understands what it takes to be successful in this world. Noah understands integrity. I counted something you'll never grasp. Ray's smirk faltered for a moment before he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. You think you've won, don't you? But the thing about people like you, Alex, is that you can never hold on to the things you fight. So hard to protect your children. We'll always wonder if you're the villain in this story. I stood, refusing to engage further. Enjoy your time. Here, oh why? It's the closest you'll ever get to having control over anyone again. As I left, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Ray's words no longer held power over me, and seeing they wouldn't hold power over my children either. With a why effectively neutralized, the focus shifted to healing. Family dinners became a weekly tradition, and while not every conversation was easy, they were honest. Noah started sharing more about his internship, even asking for my input on a few projects. Ellie confided in me about her struggles with forgiveness, and Lily continued to bridge the gaps between us all. One evening, as we sat around the table, laughing over an old family story, I realized how far we'd come. The road to rebuilding trust hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it for the first time in years. I felt like a father. Again, not a perfect one, but one my children could rely on. And in the quiet moments, I allowed myself to hope that the scars we bore would eventually become the foundation of something stronger. Rebuilding a family is never a straightforward path, and I saw that more clearly with anyone else. My eldest daughter had always been confident, outspoken, and quick to judge, a trait I knew she had inherited from her mother. But underneath her sharp exterior was a young woman trying to navigate the ruins of trust that Emily and Ray had left behind one crisp fall morning. Ellie called to invite me to lunch. It was the first time she'd initiated a one-on-one meeting since everything had fallen apart. She chose a chic cafe in the city one I remembered her mentioning was a favorite of Emily's. I wondered if that was intentional, but I pushed the thought aside and focused on what mattered. Ellie had reached out when I arrived. She was already seated at a corner table, scrolling through her phone. Her designer coat hung neatly over the back of her chair, as she looked every bit the poised young woman I'd always admired. Yet her expression was guarded, her eyes flickering with uncertainty when she spotted me. "Dad," she greeted, standing briefly to give me a hug. It was a small gesture, but it carried weight. We hadn't hugged since before the fallout. "Ellie," I said, taking my seat across from her. "Thanks for inviting me." The waiter approached and we ordered our meals. Ellie's gaze darted around the cafe as if she were afraid of being overheard. Finally, she took a deep breath and fixed her eyes on me. "I've been thinking a lot," she began, her tone steady, but hesitant about everything. "Mama, why? You asked." I waited, sensing she needed space to find her words. "I was so angry. She admitted it, you at Mom, at everyone. I wanted someone to blame and you were the easiest target. You were distant, always working. And Mom," she made it seem like you didn't care. Her voice cracked slightly and she paused, fiddling with her napkin. I wanted to reach out to reassure her, but I knew she needed to say this on her own terms. But when everything came out, she continued, I started questioning all of it. The things she said about you, about why the marriage ended, about how we should feel about Ray, and then seeing the evidence. She trailed off, her face contorting with a mixture of frustration and regret. "I feel like such an idiot. How could I not see it? How could I let her manipulate me like that? You were a child, Ellie," I said, gently. "And Emily was very good at controlling narratives. She wanted you to believe her version of the story, because it made things easier for her. That doesn't make it right," Ellie snapped. "This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside." Her anger wasn't directed at me. She lied to us. She made us believe I was some kind of hero, and he was just using us to get to you. The waiter arrived with our food and we paused, the clatter of plates breaking the tension. Ellie took a sip of her drink before continuing. "I guess what I'm trying to say is, I'm sorry," she said. "Finally, I was awful to you, and you didn't deserve it." Her apology hit me like a wave. For so long, I had thought Ellie might never see past the web of lies. Hearing her say these words was more healing than I could have imagined. "I forgive you," I said, simply. I always have. She blinked rapidly, as though fighting tears, and nodded. I want to move forward. Dad, I want us to be a family again. Ellie's journey didn't end with that lunch. The weeks that followed were filled with ups and downs. She began opening up about the guilt she carried, not just for how she treated me, but for her part in enabling our wise schemes. She admitted she'd been tempted to continue seeing Ray even after his arrest, desperate to cling to the version of him she'd once admired. But ultimately, she chose to cut ties. One evening, Ellie came to my house with a stack of notebooks. She placed them on the kitchen table with a sense of finality. These are from the charity galas. Mom and Why took me to, she explained. Contacts, notes, everything they had me working on. I don't know if any of it matters now, but I thought you should have it. I flipped through the pages, recognizing names and events tied to Emily and Ray's social maneuvering. The notebooks were a trove of information about their network, one I hadn't fully understood before. This is helpful, I said, looking up at her. Thank you, she shrugged, but there was a glimmer of relief in her eyes. I want to make things right in whatever way I can. Around the same time, Ellie began therapy. It was her own decision, spurred by the realization that she had internalized many of Emily's manipulative tendencies. She told me about her sessions. Cautiously at first, I cursed, testing my reaction. But over time, she grew more comfortable sharing her progress. I'm learning a lot about myself, she said during one of our family dinners. Like how I used to equate control with love, because that's what Mom modeled. But I don't want to be like that anymore. Her vulnerability inspired Noah and Lily to open up as well, and our family dinners became a space for honest, sometimes painful conversations. We talked about the past, but we also talked about the future, about what kind of family we wanted to be. The turning point for Ellie came during her best friend's wedding. She asked me to accompany her, a gesture that carried more weight than she'd probably realized throughout the evening. She introduced me to her friends as my dad with a pride I hadn't seen in years. During a quiet moment, she pulled me aside. I've been thinking about my own wedding, she said. When the time comes, I'd like you to walk me down the aisle. Her words caught me off guard, and for a moment, I couldn't speak when I finally managed a response. My voice was thick with emotion. It would be an honor. Ellie, she smiled, and for the first time in years, I saw the girl who used to light up the room with her laughter, unburdened by lies and betrayal. Ellie's journey wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about rediscovering who she was. Outside, the shadow of Emily and Ray's influence. Watching her grow, seeing her take ownership of her life was one of the greatest rewards of the painful journey we'd all endured as I walked her to her car that evening. She hugged me, tightly, holding on longer than usual. Thank you for not giving up on me, she said softly. I never will, I promised. And in that moment, I knew our family was stronger than it had ever been. If Ellie's journey was one of introspection and repair, Noah's path was a storm of anger and disillusionment. My son, always the most ambitious and headstrong of the triplets, had been Ray's protege in the months leading up to the collapse. Ray's manipulative flattery had filled Noah with grand ideas of leadership and legacy, twisting his natural drive into something far more destructive. When Ray's empire fell, Noah was left grappling with the rubble, unsure of who he was, without the promises Ray had made. It was several weeks after Ray's arrest, when Noah finally came to see me. He arrived, unannounced, his usually confident demeanor replaced by an almost boyish awkwardness. I opened the door to find him standing there with his hands shoved deep into his pockets, his gaze fixed on the ground. Can we talk? He asked, his voice barely audible. I stepped aside, letting him in. Of course, we settled in the living room, the weight and unspoken words hanging heavy between us. Noah fidgeted with the hem of his shirt, something he hadn't done since he was a child. I don't even know where to start, he admitted. Finally, wherever you feel comfortable, I said, keeping my tone steady. I knew this wasn't easy for him, and I didn't want to make it any harder. He took a deep breath, staring at the coffee table as if it held the answers he was searching for. I feel like everything I thought I knew was a lie. Or why none? Even myself. I waited, letting him find his way through the tangle of emotions. I looked up to our why. He continued, his voice laced with bitterness. He made me feel important, like I had a future worth fighting for. But it was all manipulation, wasn't it? He didn't care about me. He just wanted to use me to hurt you. His words hit hard, but I kept my composure. Noah, you're not responsible for what I did. He was a master manipulator, and he preyed on your trust. Noah looked up at me. Then his eyes filled with pain. I let him. I believed him. I turned my back on you. Because it was easier to believe his lies than to admit. I might be wrong. That doesn't make you weak, I said firmly. It makes you human. We all want to believe in the people we admire over the next several weeks. Noah and I began to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't easy. Noah carried a lot of guilt, and his anger often bubbled to the surface in unexpected ways. He lashed out at our why, at Emily, and even at himself. But slowly, he began to channel that anger into something more productive. He took a leave of absence from college, using the time to immerse himself in understanding what had gone wrong. He read every article about Ray's fraudulent empire, dissecting the schemes and deceptions with the same analytical mind. He once used to solve puzzles as a child. One evening, Noah came to me with a stack of papers. I've been researching corporate ethics, he said, setting the papers on the kitchen table. I want to understand how someone like our wife could get away with so much for so long. I nodded, impressed by his determination. It's a complex system, but understanding it is the first step toward fixing it. He smiled faintly. That's why I was hoping you'd say I applied for an internship at a compliance firm. They specialize in preventing corporate fraud. I couldn't hide my pride. That's an excellent step. Noah, I'm proud of you. His expression softened, and for the first time in a long while, I saw a glimmer of the boy who used to look up to me with unfiltered admiration. Thanks, Dad, that means a lot. As Noah dove deeper into his studies, he began to understand just how much damage R.Y. and Emily had done. Not just to me, but to the industry as a whole. The realization fueled his determination to make amends, not through words, but through actions. One day he approached me with a bold idea. What if we created a scholarship for students studying corporate ethics? Something to encourage the next generation to do better. I raised an eyebrow. Intrigued. That's an ambitious idea. Noah shrugged, his confidence returning. I want to make sure what happened to us doesn't happen to anyone else. And I think this is a good way to start. We spent weeks refining the idea, working together to create a program that would not only fund education, but also provide mentorship and real-world experience. Noah took the lead, presenting the proposal to several firms and securing funding from a network of business leaders who shared his vision. The scholarship program launched a year later, and Noah gave the opening speech at the ceremony. Standing on the stage, he spoke with a passion and clarity that left the audience captivated. My family's story is a cautionary tale, he said, his voice steady and resolute. But it's also a story of resilience and redemption. We can't change the past, but we can learn from it, and we can build a future where integrity and innovation go hand in hand. As I watched from the audience, I felt a swell of pride that was impossible to contain. Noah had found his purpose, and in doing so, he was helping to heal, not just himself, but our entire family. The relationship between Noah and his sisters remained complicated. Ellie, who had been closest to our why, struggled to forgive Noah for his enthusiastic participation in Ray's schemes. But over time, their shared experiences brought them closer. They began to see each other, not as adversaries, but as allies in the fight to rebuild what had been broken. Noah and Lily, on the other hand, forged a bond built on mutual understanding. Lily's quiet strength complemented Noah's fiery determination, and they often worked together on initiatives related to the scholarship program. Watching them collaborate was a reminder that, despite everything, the bonds of family could still endure. One evening, Noah and I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. He leaned back in his chair, a rare moment of relaxation in his otherwise driven existence. Do you ever think about what might have happened if our wife hadn't come into our lives? He asked, his tone reflective all the time. I admitted. But what matters is what we do with the aftermath. He nodded, thoughtfully. I think I finally understand that. It's not about erasing the past. It's about using it to shape a better future. As the stars began to appear overhead, I felt a sense of peace. I hadn't known in years. Noah had faced the darkest parts of himself and come out stronger. He wasn't just rebuilding his life. He was building a legacy. One rooted in the values I had always hoped to instill in my children. In that moment, I knew we were on the right path together. The triplet 18th birthday marked the beginning of the end of Ray's plans, but it also symbolized something far more profound. The turning of a page for my family. In the aftermath of everything, the pieces of our fractured lives had begun to realign, albeit in new and unexpected ways. This wasn't the family I had envisioned, but it was one I was determined to nurture into something strong and enduring. Ellie's wedding, 2 years after the fall of R.Y. and Emily's schemes, was a celebration of love and reconciliation. She had met her fiancé, Daniel, during one of her therapy sessions. He was the younger brother of her therapist, visiting from out of town. The connection had been instantaneous, and Daniel's grounded nature became the anchor Ellie needed during her healing journey. The ceremony was a small, intimate affair held at a coastal vineyard. Ellie looked radiant, her once hot-eyed demeanor replaced by a quiet confidence. I walked her down the aisle, a moment I hadn't dared to hope for during those dark days when she had viewed me with nothing but contempt. As we reached the altar, she leaned in and whispered, "Thank you, Dad, for never giving up on us." Her words stayed with me long after the vows were exchanged, a reminder of how far we had come. Lily, Heather, the pragmatist, had fully embraced her role as an innovator and advocate for ethical medical technology. Her startup, a nonprofit focused on providing an affordable vaccine distribution in underserved areas, had gained international recognition. She often joked that she was following in my footsteps. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. I knew her vision was entirely her own. One evening, as we walked through the research labs of my company, she turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever regret any of it?" she asked. I paused, considering her question carefully. I regret the pain it caused, but I don't regret the lessons we learned or the good that's come from it. She smiled, her expression a mix of understanding and admiration. I think I'm starting to see it that way too. Noah had become a force in the field of corporate ethics, his scholarship program blossoming into a full-fledged foundation. He had taken on the role of a mentor, guiding young professionals through the complexities of balancing profit and integrity. Watching in him thrive was one of my greatest joys, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit at one of the Foundation's annual galas. Noah introduced me as a guest speaker, standing before an audience of future leaders. I shared the story of Medic's rise, fall, and transformation. But it was Noah's closing remarks that stole the evening. "My father taught me that success is not about what you take, but what you give," he said, his voice steady and sincere. He showed me that even in the face of betrayal, we can choose to rebuild, to create something better. That's the legacy I want to carry forward. I rarely thought of Emily anymore. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. I knew from mutual acquaintances that her life had taken a stark turn. After serving her sentence, she moved to a modest apartment in Phoenix, far removed from the luxury she once coveted. Attempts to reconnect with the triplets had been met with polite, but for refusals. Her fall from grace was complete, and she now lived as a shadow of her former self. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. I felt no obligation to her. I couldn't deny the occasional pang of sadness for what might have been. Emily had made her choices, and the consequences were hers to bear still. I hoped she found some measure of peace in her solitude. The triplets and I had dinner together every month, a tradition we'd established as part of our ongoing effort to rebuild our family. These evenings were filled with laughter and conversation, or far from the tense silences that once defined our interactions on one such evening. Ellie shared news of her pregnancy, sparking a round of cheers and toasts. Lily teased Noah about his bachelor status, while he retorted that he was married to the cause. For the first time in years, I felt a profound sense of completeness. A family, not without flaws, but one united by love and understanding. As the night wound down, Noah pulled me aside. "Dad," he said, his tone serious, yet warm. "I know I've said it before, but thank you for everything, for not giving up on us. Even when we gave up on you." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's what family does, Noah. We fight for each other, even when it's hard." As the years passed, the ripples of our choices spread far beyond our immediate circle. The company I have rebuilt with Lily and our dedicated team became of ethical innovation. Noah's foundation transformed the way businesses approach corporate responsibility, while Ellie's work as a psychologist helped countless families navigate their own struggles. On the 5th anniversary of the scholarship program, we gathered for a special ceremony at the foundation's headquarters. The triplets stood by my side as we unveiled a plaque dedicated to the program's mission to inspire integrity, foster innovation, and build a better future. The applause that followed was thunderous, but my focus was on my children. Their smiles, their accomplishments, their resilience. It was all the proof I needed that we had overcome the darkness and found the light in the quiet moments. I often reflected on the journey that had brought us here. Betrayal had shattered our lives, but it had also given us the opportunity to rebuild stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. The waves outside my Caribbean home continued their eternal rhythm, a reminder of life, cycles of destruction and renewal. In those waves, I found solace, knowing that the legacy we had created would endure long after I was gone. As I watched the sunset with my family, I felt a profound sense of peace. We had faced the storm, and we had emerged not unscathed, but transformed. And in the end, that was enough. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened.